Welcome to the show today. We have a very special guest, Mr. Devin Alvarez. Devin, why don't you say hello to our listeners for us?
Howdy, y'all.
We got a little Q&A today to give our listeners a little insight into the cannabis industry of regulations, regulatory entities in Florida, hemp, and we have an expert environmental scientist here to give his perspective. Without further ado, let's jump directly into the Q&A. So, Devin, what do you got going on in Florida right now? Why don't you give us a little background on the current state of affairs in Florida? Because you're in the capital right now, correct?
Yeah, so I went to school here for about a decade or so, and kind of came up on the Florida-Georgia line. And I got family here. I came back to hang out with them and really, boots on the ground, kind of figure out what's going on in the Florida market. And so the state of the market is this. As you know, Amendment 2 passed in November, landslide victory, biggest one marijuana's had, period, everywhere yet. 71.3% of the voters voted, yes for medical marijuana. And the language of the bill is pretty specific. Check out the notes in the podcast. We'll have Frank put up, relevant links so you guys can see all this stuff for yourself. But so that amendment passed, but there already was marijuana in Florida previously. Not a lot of people may know that, but there was a low THC bill, the Charlotte's Web bill, if you will, passed in 2014. And, there are many opinions out there about it. The opinions I'm going to express here are not my own, but some folks were very, very happy with it, and other folks were very unhappy with it. Now, most folks who weren't in on it thought that the bill was, this 2014 bill that we're talking about, was set up to sort of hand over the market early on to a select group of people. A lot of folks are dubbing it a protectionist bill. And so that bill came online in 2014, and ultimately 7 licensees in Florida were awarded the opportunity to cultivate and distribute low THC marijuana, CBD marijuana. And so some of those folks are,
Well, you know that I actually was involved with a company that was manipulating the political works down there, and I was their formulation that they have for their oil is actually my formulation that I developed with Jesse Stanley.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
you had some relationships with folks that were lobbying to get that bill passed?
Yeah, correct. But I guess if you think about it, it was a tip of the wedge, though.
Yeah, in some ways,
And I know that, after I was done there, I would say, I don't know how the formulation is now, but I left there in 2013. So I have no idea how the formulation is now. But back then, it actually was successful. Because I was the one that was doing it, and I was there getting first-on experience, seeing the patients coming into the lab, with their children, and the fact that they haven't had any epileptic seizures in 6 to 8 months of taking the medicine, and they haven't had anything happen to them when they were having 50 a day, and it's insane. The difference that it could make.
The medical proof is there, right? But yet it all still remains Schedule 1. And in fact, CBD, one of the main components of this formulation, is up again for contention with the DEA, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So this 2014 legislation came out, and people were getting positioned ahead of time to sort of start capitalizing and cashing in on what's going to be happening here. And then, so I had the opportunity to attend a recent rulemaking workshop. The amendment, as it was put into law, gives the Department of Health 6 months and 9 months to get rules promulgated and get this whole program rolled out. And if they don't, it opens them up to lawsuits from the greater Florida public, which is, it's a huge endeavor, putting together a program from nothing and to serve the public in a matter of 9 months. We're talking, Colorado had been working on this for years and building as they went along. And so it's a big task for everybody. And The gentleman heading it up, a fellow named Christian Bax, is in charge of the Office of Compassionate Use, which is the organization responsible for administering these programs and the rules.
At the end of the day, though, is it really a big task? Because, like, Colorado pretty much laid the foundation down for how it should be done and how it's supposed to be done. I mean, it has evolved. The Colorado marijuana industry regulatory entities have evolved. But where they're at now, if you just took that framework and just mimicked it, I mean, it's already been done for you. You know what I mean? Just follow the protocol, and if you need to adopt it to your state, then just change it. I don't know why they're not doing it down there like that.
Correct, and that was actually, if you go back and listen to my public testimony at that rulemaking hearing, you're echoing my same sentiments, which is, we have other models, guys, and when I looked at Christian's eyes and I, listened to all the testimony, they've been doing this. This is the last workshop 6 that they've done. So, you could just see he looked overwhelmed by this. And that's what I told him. I said, look, you have other models in other places. They're not perfect, but they're working. So why don't we just go get those and adjust them accordingly to our city and move forward? So, we're not reinventing the wheel here. And we don't need to, but what they have done at this point, if you look at the initial draft, and I mean, it's a draft. So drafts, people want to react to the first draft, and they say, oh, what are you trying to do? But maybe they're just putting it out there to get something out, to get feedback. But, the current draft basically just takes the program as it was written and developed for that low THC bill of 2014 and just right into this medical marijuana program, and there are a number of problems with that that were brought up by folks that were there giving testimony that day, patients, doctors, and attorneys. Some of the primary complaints that I was hearing at this was the way that the current language is set up is that there's a 90-day waiting period to get the medicine. So, you go to a doctor, you're a sick person. A lot of the people, that are listed as qualifying diseases are pretty serious diseases, and it's like under this program, you have to wait 90 days to get the medicine the doctor thinks you should have to treat your condition.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy, dude.
It's like the bordering lunacy. Honestly, I mean, let me ask you, if you need ibuprofen, I mean, do you have to wait that long to get that if you have a headache?
No, you don't have to. No, if a doctor says you need medicine, you get it then. You go to the pharmacy, you get it as soon as they can give it to you. You don't have to wait 90 days. Why are they doing this? It makes no sense.
Nobody's greasing their pockets, man. That's what's going on.
And so that's a major complaint that they had. And I mean, I understand. I mean, my stepfather has COPD. The sooner I can get him this medicine, the better. And so, so that was a major complaint. The other major complaint was that, it's a 45-day window. So every 45 days, you have to go back and get with your physician to get a renewal on your medicine. You can't call it in. You can't. It's 45 days. You got to go in for another checkup and get it all done again. And that seems overly burdensome. And many of the patients are echoing the same sentiment, as well as the doctors.
I can see why. Let me ask you a question. What are some things that are proposed right now in regards to regulatory entities getting their licenses and acquiring businesses and acquiring storefronts and acquiring cultivation facilities? Like, what's really going on? Just so like our listeners can actually get caught up if they're not in the know. Some people might be listening in the know, and that's fine. But let's catch everyone up to speed so that we can really dig into the nitty gritty of this.
Well, so basically, the way that it's currently rolled out is that there are no more licenses. Once they hit, like, I think it's 250,000 patients registered in the database, they're going to allow a handful of other licenses. But the way it's written right now is they're just handing it over to those same 7 licensees that were licensed under that low THC bill. They're not opening it up for any other, okay, so an extrapolation from the Colorado market based on patient size and dispensaries serving those patients, you got about 100,000 patients in Colorado. Florida has about 4 times the population. So we can expect about 400,000 patients in Florida. But we're probably going to have more patients because, as everyone knows, old people love to live in Florida, you know? And so to meet those demands, a 400,000 patient count, we're going to need about 3 million square feet under cultivation. 3 million. Right now, those 7 licensees have 175,000 square feet under cultivation.
Yikes.
So there's a huge gap. And so what does this mean?
It means we need more cannabis, right?
Yeah, we're going to need more cannabis under cultivation. And how are they going to meet that? How are they going to scale from 175,000 to 3 million square feet? And how is this good for the consumer market? This is going to drive up prices because demand is going to be high and supply is going to be low. And these entities are controlling the market space. You know, they colluded to get the bill in place. You don't think they can collude on price? Where's the competition? You know, where are the American principles behind free market economics?
Well, I wonder if they kind of doing the opposite of what they did in Colorado, where Colorado allowed it to go to expand and then contract. I wonder if they're just starting off contracted. Do you get what I'm saying in that regard? Like,
so yeah, I mean, maybe they're like, I mean, yeah, because they're probably, you know, staring at a plant down here a little bit. It's very conservative.
yeah, so, I mean, if you think about it, like, they probably don't want that much all at once. I mean, it's the first state. I mean, I know it sounds stereotypical, but it's the first state in the South to get legalized cannabis. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, full on. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for you to say that because I mean, maybe there are some non-conspirators. I mean, but these are the things that patients and doctors and business folk at this as reasons why they have to replace the existing system with something that's going to be more tractable for the patients. And I actually even we heard from some patients there that were saying that they couldn't afford the price of this low THC program because demand is so high and supply is so low. And
what do you see happening in regards to patients being able to cultivate their own medicine and to be able to basically create products with their own medicine in their own home?
So there are some folks that are talking about that too, and sort of demanding that as a right. And as it stands now, there is no space for that, you know, to be allowed under statute. So as it stands now, it looks like it's going to be completely illegal. You know, and there were folks in there talking about, you know, how, you know, you can't grow your own. If you grow your own, it's not medicine. You know, somehow it's like the medical industry, you know, is the only thing that owns, you know, the concept of medicine and healing. You know, and a lot of folks we're not happy about that. They want the ability to cultivate themselves. You know, through plants.
In my last podcast, I talked with Corey. Maybe it wasn't my last. It was a couple podcasts ago. I talked with Corey about growing and the regulatory entities in Colorado here lessening the amount of plants that you're allowed to cultivate. For one, they're coming hard on the doctors who are prescribing plant counts above 24. So you won't get like 99 or 75 or 30 something plants. You'll max you'll get is 24, and if you're lucky to even find a doctor that will put his name or her name on a script that even says 24. And on top of that, they're going to charge you a lot of money because it's very risky to do that. But it's basically now that they're forcing you to have the 6 medicinal, if you have medicinal license, and the 6 recreational that you get, which is 12 total, which is a very small garden. And the constricting of that really starts to push a thriving black market going on because people, you know, might not be able to afford the prices of dispensaries where you're paying, you know, street prices, which are $30-$60, which is basically what some of the dispensaries are having, unless you want to absolutely buy something that's pitiful on the shelf. You're not going to really get a good deal anymore recreationally. The prices are still up there. They're not down where they are almost equal in regards to medical and recreational matching up price-wise. So, I mean, to me, them not allowing you to be able to grow in your house, it forces you to buy your cannabis from, a dispensary. And in Florida right now, they don't have the regulatory analytics that they have over here in Colorado, where things have to be tested for, residual solvents, pesticides, contaminants.
There is no quality control program here at all yet on the books, and I think that
it forces you to get like crappy medicine, right? I mean, doesn't it? It forces you to get whatever they're going to sell you, and it could be.
There's no checks and balances. There's no oversight, and yeah, I mean, it's a big market, and there's the idea that there's no quality control regulations on the book yet, is completely absurd. And this is an area that I'm looking to have an impact on because, of my experience in Colorado, working to build out this program, is something that we need to be doing here. And so I was just having conversations with Mike and those guys at the lab today about, how we may be able to leverage that experience down here to get something like that in place to protect public safety and, to ensure that what patients buy is what they're getting. Because, one of the parents got up and talked about it. He's like, look, how do I know what I'm getting? It could say anything on there and it could be anything. And that's the truth. And that's what we saw on the ground with these new operators that don't know what they're doing. And even if they do know what they're doing, you can't control everybody in the chain of command. So that's why you have to have the testing. And that is in addition to the argument over, how many licenses are going out and whether or not this is a state-sponsored cartel or they're actually trying to protect, what's going on here or not, there is no quality control regulation here, and it's something that is vitally missing from Florida, and we need to have it.
Oh, I agree, man. I absolutely agree. And it really what it is a lot of the time, most of the time, I want to say, most of the people who are vendoring cannabis are usually out for their bottom line and do the bare minimum when it comes to meeting the regulatory, demands or the regulatory criteria. They literally walk and skirt the line because the more they invest in the product, the less profit that they basically have, and the more everything costs. So
sure, and we also have a paternalistic society where it's at this point the culture is, well, if they didn't tell us or make us do it, it probably isn't that important. So with that being the case, we have to tell them that it's important and make it so that they even know it's the standard they need to meet.
And then at the end of the day, Devin, do you think do some of them actually even care? You know what I mean? That's the other question we should ask ourselves as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have your bottom line businessman out there that's going to only do what they have to, and they're going to skirt the line. And absolutely, that happens. I mean, you and I both saw that over and over again in the industry as we worked in Colorado.
Totally.
And so I would say, in addition to the fight over the licenses and how many people are actually licensed and able to provide product to people, the quality control thing is just a blank space that, no one's even really talking about, and it's being completely overlooked. And so it's a place to have high impact. And that actually reminds me, as I'm looking at the notes here, there is currently no allowed flower. You're not allowed to have flower. It's got to be derivative products.
Oh, wow.
And that's a
who's regulating the extractions of these derivative products and these infusions of these derivative products?
Who's regulating anything at this point? There isn't one body. There is no marijuana enforcement division, that's supposed to be looking at these entities. As far as I can see, there's no seed to sale tracking systems in yet. There's no quality control regulations in place. It's like these companies that have these licenses have currently, under the current way it's written, have free reign. Now, this could all be changing. Christian said that a new draft would be coming out after all these rulemakings, and I really hope that they start incorporating some of this stuff. And if they don't, we need to be going down there and speaking to them directly because maybe they just don't know. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe we need to bring them the models and show them. So. And as you know, the entourage effect, and whole plant medicine, there's a lot of other components to the plant that, can be lost in an extraction, and certainly lost in an extraction that's not quality.
Well, so you're talking non-polar and polar extractions because the non-polar is going to be the one that has the least plant derivative in it, like a CO2 extraction. Hydrocarbon has a little bit of polarity to it, but you're going to get a really nice clean extraction with that ethanol one if you do it properly. Or
Sure, but
my
in either case,
solventless is
you're still not getting. It's still not, the flour. The flour is special because it's whole, and we're, no matter how good our extraction is, we're always going to lose a little something.
Well, I don't know. I like doing dry sift. I think dry sift really gets you the closest you're going to get to flour. I think
I would agree with that.
solventless as well.
You're breaking the glands off, and in a way, it is kind of whole plant at that point. With a dry sift or a solventless extraction, you're really just getting the pieces of the plant off that have the active ingredients, and you're sort of getting rid of the inner parts of the plant, So I would agree with that. I would say dry sift and solventless are part of that. There were lawyers in there arguing that this whole, that them not allowing flour is against what the constitutional amendment actually says, and that it's really just an artifact of this low THC bill.
Oh wow.
And so speaking of bills, there's actually two. So there's two bills written, and of course they're not up for discussion or voting yet. Session's not in quite yet here, but there's the Brandis bill, which is a free market bill. I would dub it as a free market bill. And then there's the Bradley bill, which some are dubbing as a kind of a more of a protectionist bill. And the Bradley bill seeks to completely overturn the low THC bill and get it off the books and completely gut the compassionate use program and replace it with something that seems to be mimicking more of what's going on in Colorado.
Nice.
And the Bradley bill, as it's been explained to me, is set up to extend the existing licensee count by so many folks and license the next people that are in line that have submitted applications that have passed. And so those are going to be two really important bills to pay attention to this session for folks that are interested in the Florida market, and the outcome of one of those bills is going to forever shape the future of the market here.
Devin, what is primarily Florida has been really largely backed by the alcohol industry historically. So, what do you think's the pushback in regards to the alcohol industry and this happening? Also, tobacco is pretty big there too. There's Ybor City, Jacksonville's where Swisher Sweets is at. There's a lot of tobacco firms in Florida as well due to its environment. Is there pushback from these two types of industries against what's going on regulatory wise, or maybe are they trying to make it harder for this industry to thrive in any way?
That's a good question, Frank. I don't know anything immediately that comes to mind. I do know that alcohol sales have gone down a little bit since pot sales have increased in Colorado. So it does seem that the pot is showing its colors as a substitute product for alcohol and tobacco. And it does impact the sales. If I were in alcohol and tobacco, I would be smart and buy into the future. Let's face it, alcohol and tobacco aren't going to go anywhere, but their sales are certainly going to be impacted, and it would make sense to diversify. But I don't know if those industries are specifically fighting it at all. Let's do a quick search and see what we find.
Well, I didn't know if you not particularly that. I was just more so curious if you've noticed any of this type of activity when you go to these meetings and you go to these sittings. If there's any of those type of vocalizations from those industries there.
Nope. No, I didn't see any representatives from those at least speak out and introduce. Oh, you know who was fighting it though? Publix, of all places. The grocery store was really publicly fighting medical marijuana.
What were they fighting? They were fighting the fact that dispensaries being near their stores, or what?
No, they just didn't want it here. They just they thought they're a big old guard. They think medical marijuana is like the devil's lettuce, and they put a lot of money into fighting Amendment 2. Of course, they lost by a landslide, but
they do make good subs.
They make excellent subs, and that's what I'm saying. Like, why wouldn't they want it? You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody knows things tasted a little better, and public sub would, go a long way.
I agree. Let's talk about some of the things that are on the horizon for the future of the regulations in Florida, the industry being regulated, the home caregiver or / home grower, their regulations. What do you see on the horizon coming up?
So there is language about caregivership in the bill, in the Amendment 2, constitutionally. What the caregivership means and what that is yet to be determined. I mean, I think it's under the purview. I think it's under the legal purview of the Department of Health to say, hey, caregivers could grow a certain number of plants for their patients and stuff and set it up like a model in Colorado. But it doesn't seem that there's a lot of appetite to do that. It doesn't seem like that's anything they really want to entertain. And so, for the foreseeable future, I don't think we're going to see a caregivership patient kind of at home, cottage industry grow model anytime soon in Florida, if at all ever. Big business is really trying to get its hooks in hard. And the state doesn't seem interested in, any opportunity for, diversion, basically. I think they're really trying to stay away from that.
That's a real shame, isn't it? Because that's really the liberation from having the right to have that medicine for yourself is for you to be able to create your own. And when you take that right away, it's like, did we really win, or is this just something that's given to us to appease the masses? You know what I mean? Is it something that is open to expansion? I mean, these are questions that, like, I ask myself when I hear about the happenings in Florida in regards to regulation and what they're doing with everything down there.
Yeah, I mean, not letting people grow your own plants at home is fucking preposterous, okay? It's a fucking plant, This isn't freedom, It's not freedom to put it all into business and say you can't do this at your own home. I mean, you're denying me my own ability to have something for myself that's helpful and beneficial to me. And that's fascism. That's totalitarianism.
It's the same thing as saying you can't grow tomatoes in your house. You can't grow celery. You can't grow, rosemary at your house. You can't grow your own flowers. I mean, where do you draw the line at that point? I mean, it's not all these other refined plants that create these very harmful drugs that are scheduled in the same fashion as cannabis or hemp. I mean, they have to be refined into the products that they're made. Cannabis is just grown, and it even naturally it'll dry itself if you don't cut it down. It'll just dry itself and turn brown. I mean, it's literally grown in its own form. It doesn't have to be furtherly refined. People furtherly refine it because they enjoy the extractions and the infusions of cannabis, but it doesn't need to be that to be what it is and what it's best at. So yeah, it's crazy that if you compare that to not being able to grow your own spices, I mean, they even allow you to grow your own poisonous plants that you can do an extraction on and you can kill somebody with, but you're not allowed to take a plant that hasn't killed anybody. So, yeah.
It's totally preposterous, and unfortunately I don't see that changing because, of course, the Bradley bill is definitely not going to include language like that because some folks stuff that in the protectionist bill as it stands, and then of course the Brandis bill, which is seeking to open the market up, and it's a business-friendly bill. And if it were to include something like that, it would likely be destroyed in the legislature and not actually have an opportunity to pass. And unfortunately, while the citizens of Florida might be progressive, I mean, clearly they voted for Amendment 2 in a landslide, the legislature is very far from reflecting, the voice of the people in these matters, as is so unfortunately often the case in American politics these days.
I agree, Devin. Well, let's jump into our last topic. Let's talk about hemp. Let's talk about some updates that you got on hemp. Let's do that. Because I know you got some interesting stuff going on right now since the last time we talked. So, what do you got going on?
Yeah. So So there's been some interesting developments in hemp. A few months ago, the DEA issued a statement of clarification and created a new classification code for marijuana extracts. And in this classification and issuance, they explicitly stated that CBD, cannabidiol, the non-psychoactive, non-addictive product of cannabis sativa, which is also produced in hemp, is a Schedule I substance. And, it's totally mind-blowing, because to be a Schedule I, you have to be highly addictive and of no medical value. But it's a non-psychoactive, non-addictive substance, and it has medical value, as we've seen time and time again in the news. CBD administered to people who are having seizures, cuts seizures down, stops seizures. Okay, that's clearly medical value. Now, I know it hasn't been demonstrated through the FDA's protocol, and GW Pharmaceuticals is working on this. And actually, that's why some people believe that they're making this move. It's kind of a big pharma attack to try to corner the market, But the DEA is clearly behind the times. There is some precedent for supporting the hemp industry in this, and in fact, the Hemp Industry Association, along with the Hope and Law Group, is actually currently suing the DEA over this because they firmly believe they've stepped way outside their purview. Now, there is some legal precedent. So there was a case that the Hemp Industry Association brought against the DEA on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which was about a case where you had a hemp products company, bringing in food, hemp oil, clothing, that kind of stuff. And some of these products had trace cannabinoids present, trace THC, trace CBD, and the DEA had to come down on them and tell them they were moving around Schedule I drugs. Okay, and mind-blowing. But the HIA, the Industry Association, sued them, and they won. The court told them it's trace, it's natural, you can't do this, you're done. Additionally, the Farm Bill of 2014, which is up for renewal this year, and so the language in that's going to be important. And if our listeners care about this topic, I would really encourage them to tune into what's going on with the Farm Bill this year in Congress. But the current Farm Bill provides and affords protections for hemp products, and basically says, look, it's being produced within state regulations and universities, etc., that it's good to go, leave it alone, But the DEA doesn't want to leave this alone. Now, the DEA did tell Forbes magazine that it's not an enforcement priority for them. It's not something they're really keyed into dealing with. And I would say that ultimately they're on a losing battle here. They just took down a bunch of false marijuana information yesterday, finally, for after being petitioned for years and years to do this. And so I'd say we're going to win it, but it's definitely sent major ripples through the community. And there are a lot of people in the industry, in the hemp industry, that aren't actualizing their business plans and business models out of fear of the DEA cracking down on them. However, there are plenty of other companies that are avant-garde, leading the way and doing it anyways, that continue to ship to all 50 states and globally. I guess if push comes to shove, are going to take the DEA on from a position of power.
I mean, I could tell you firsthand that there are some firms that were in Colorado that were willing to go full-fledged into hemp extractions and hemp-based products here in Colorado, and they exited the market and sold all their assets in December and the end of November. And yeah, I mean, it's just they either stayed or they left. And when they left, they literally dropped at the drop of a dime. They were gone. They didn't want anything to do with this industry or the hemp. I should just say the hemp industry after the DEA ruled that. So yeah, I could firsthand for sure.
Yeah, I mean, does it hurt? Does it hurt the development of the industry? We'll see what the court case has to say against the DEA. And to those operators that are willing to risk it, that are willing to be leaders and step out there and do the right thing, and adhere to natural law, not this questionable DEA ruling, which may not even be man's law. The prizes may be there for those people because let's face it, all work in this industry has been illegal, and even still in this day in these state laboratories where it's legal, we're still operating under an illegal environment, and we're still all operating, especially with the Jeff Sessions appointment, under somewhat frightening times that the tides could turn, and that's the gumption that it takes to be doing it.
I mean, I personally don't think that the tide's going to turn at all. I think we're going to be just fine. I think that the economics of the situation will more so speak for itself. And I mean, it's an easy piggybacker to stimulate jobs and ancillary industry jobs in America. And by restricting this industry, I think that would be counterintuitive to the vision, mission, and purpose statement of the current, the current presidency. So, I mean, I personally think it's going to go the opposite direction. I think we'll be all right with that. I think it's more so the state level regulatory bodies that we really need to be concerned with, because they seem to be very, very controlling and constrictive on their regulatory interests with cannabis. They seem very unwilling to be flexible on some of these policies. I mean, I think it's more of a state issue when it comes to regulation and what they're doing, because it seems like the federal government's just kind of trying to cover their backside so that they don't get in trouble with the rules that they've put in place, because they can't fully legalize it for some reason. I don't know why it's not able to be legalized. Because if it could be legalized, it would be right now, wouldn't it? But the states that are able to essentially through the Constitution supersede the federal law, because they're allowed to govern themselves. I mean, they're not doing it as well as they should be. I think personally. I mean, do you agree with that, or do you think it's a federal thing still, or?
No, I mean, I think that a lot of people like the fearmonger, and a lot of the stuff out there that Sessions, even though he is clearly like hyper conservative, and he has said things about marijuana and his stance on it. I mean, let's be real, man. I mean, California, Florida, Colorado, these are huge economies. New York, you're not gonna. The federal government has too many fires to fight, too many things to deal with, and it's like I could not see them actually turning around and trying to come down on this. I mean, I feel like they'd be risking major civil unrest, and the economics of it, like you said, just don't really make any sense. And so really, the battle at this point, I mean, while it's with the federal government, we need to see laws change to things, especially to get banking opened up and to allow interstate commerce so we can trade among states. The real battleground really is taking place in the states, and what's like, for instance, what's going on here in Florida is critical for how, the industry is ultimately shaped at a large level.
I agree. From a consultant's point of view, I personally like it being state to state. Obviously, because you can obviously consult in multiple states, but when you have a company that's nationwide, you kind of could get locked in to certain situations where you basically can't practice within the United States if you get caught up with a company and something maybe goes sour. So I do kind of like the fact that it's separate. Each state is basically able to govern themselves in regards to their cannabis. And for me personally, as a consultant, I like seeing it that way. But you're right, it is eventually going to go nationwide, and at that point, adapt and overcome. Basically. Well, I did have an amazing time picking your brain today, Devin, and getting your expert environmental scientist insight on information in Florida and in the hemp industry. To all of our listeners, if you'd like to get in touch with Devin or any other cannabis consultants, please visit FullMountFusion.com. I'll put a link in the description box. And for those of you who found this content interesting and want more, then hit the subscribe button and like this video. Thanks for tuning into the show today.